welcome everybody. Kingdom Lum Small Town Underground. Let me get rid of this graphic here. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is Saturday night. It's right about 7:46. I'm not quite finished sharing the groups yet, but if you're just joining us, be sure to share this out. This is going to be a great show this evening. We have next to me Dr. Frank. Everybody knows, should know, a lot of my audience knows who Dr. Frank is, and I'm going to let him introduce himself properly. And we have Greasy Boots here with us tonight from Floyd County, and this is just like insane to me that we are here right now fixing to have an interview with him live in studio. So, sir, thank you so much for being a part of this and coming down. This is just it's great. And I'm admitting I'm nervous, but we're gonna plow through this. So.
Honor
Sir,
to be with you.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead and let's talk a little bit. Tell them who you are, so that if anybody new coming to the channel, just let us know who you are and what you're doing.
I'm Doug Frank. People call me Dr. Frank because of my many years in academia. People all my students call me Dr. Frank, so everybody knows me as Dr. Frank. I have a PhD in degree. It's called surface electroanalytical chemistry. What it is a combination of physics, chemistry, and lots of math. And so. That's all you need to know about it. But anyway, I have 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications. I'm a real scientist. If I weren't here doing this, I'd be in my lab. I build electronics to pay the bills, but I do real science, fundamental science. In fact, in 1990, I was nominated for a Nobel Prize in chemistry for one of my discoveries. And it empowered me to make a lot of connections around the world and go into business for myself. I left formal academics in 1996, and then went into business for myself and teaching at a small school in Cincinnati for super high gifted kids. So that's basically who I am, what I've been doing. And I closed my last business down 2017, moved out to the country, built my lab, was expecting to be doing that, and then the election happened. Well, first COVID happened.
Right.
And first COVID happened, and so I started modeling COVID all around the world. I had 150,000 people following me on Facebook. It was incredible. And then the election happened, and because people knew I was good at numbers from my COVID modeling,
right.
I was invited by the state of Pennsylvania to come in and analyze their elections at the legislature's request. And
that's right.
And then I did that work, and then Mike Lindell discovered me and made a documentary about me called Scientific Proof. That was in March of 2021, and then the rest is a mess because I have done nothing but this ever since because everybody wants my help and I don't charge. So I'm booked pretty solid. So I always tell people I'm either good or I'm cheap, but I'm booked solid.
Right. You are all over the place, man. So you're out of Cincinnati now?
Yeah, north of Cincinnati, about an hour. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a Chicago native myself, so
I've been through there many times.
Spent most of my time down in the South, though, so I'm fully Southerned in. But yeah, that's great, man. So I follow you a lot. A little background from me. I got to see your lecture or symposium, whatever you want to call it, back in Rome. Lord, when was that? It was back in the winter.
No, it's just a month or maybe 2 months ago.
Maybe 2 months ago.
January.
Yeah. January. Yeah. And it was January. Great. It was great. I mean, like I took like a 20-minute piece that you had done. It was so important. That was concerning our counties and the things you were talking about around here. And it's mind-blowing to me the data that you have and that you're sharing with people. Because, I mean, let's just face it, y'all. I mean, we've got some issues with our election process and the electronic voting machines. I'm putting that nicely, but you have really dug into the research and figured out a lot of things. So it's amazing.
Where do you come up with? I thought it was the safest, most secure elections ever, is what I heard. I think from Governor Kemp or was it Secretary of State? Is that not true? I'm confused here.
Yeah, so am I. So yeah.
But I think at least you guys will have a better time understanding each other through this because Dr. Frank is apparently having a hard time understanding some of our southern accents. So since you're from Chicago, I think maybe
it's understandable. I can kind of change it up a little bit if I need to.
I just heard the y'all there, so we got a little mixture there.
I understand y'all.
There you go. So, first off, you're what I consider the belly of the beast. I look at Georgia as probably like the number one most contested state in the union at the moment. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but just we've got so many things going on here and in our state of politics, plus the huge election, cases and the RICO cases going on. So, and I know you're going around Georgia quite a bit. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's been an advantage and a disadvantage. The fact that this is like ground zero means that there are lots of people that have brought attention to it.
right.
So you have lots of people that are the naysayers bringing attention and spinning it their way. You have lots of people trying to make money off of you. I call them grifters. They've come into town and they're collecting money from you. And then you have politicians benefiting from it. And everybody's angling it some way. And in one respect, it's good that there's lots of attention to it. But in another respect, it's bad because there's so much attention being brought in that all the citizens are sitting back watching the spectacle.
Oh, yes.
Instead of the citizens engaging the problem.
Right.
In other states where there isn't so much focus, the citizens are waking up much more quickly and have already begun doing the election reform movements. You guys are way, way behind. You're ahead in some respects and way behind in other respects. I was commenting the other day, there's a principle called the precinct strategy.
Okay.
Where the grassroots people around the country have been waking up and taking over the GOP in their state. 6 states have succeeded in doing that. You guys are the 6th. And I kind of count you only maybe halfway there. But it wasn't a clear takeover, but it was a majority. So you're kind of still in tumult. In that respect, you guys are way ahead. You've been really doing good work to try to reform the GOP in the state. You're not done with that war.
No.
You need to stay on that one. That's a very important one. The biggest advantage about me is that since I'm in 48 states, 800 counties, traveling the country, I can come in for an objective way, and I can say, this is where you're good, this is where you're not. I'm handy to you. I can bring you perspective. Your precinct strategy is great. Keep it up. Keep pushing. Don't let up on that one. That one's important.
Okay.
But your election reform stuff is way behind because you've been watching other people doing it instead of you doing it.
Well, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense, but I think the reasoning for that is that, on a normal scale of battle in politics, right? It's red versus blue. I mean, that's where
that's
the
way
battle
people
is.
think, yeah.
But the problem I feel like in Georgia is that we're battling ourselves more than anybody else. The Democrats, you have no time to even battle liberalism or Democrats because you are battling people that do not want you meddling in their business. They have their own establishment. They have their own way of doing things, and you're dang sure not going to call them out for a rigged election, right?
And that is true both in the party as well as in the state government.
Agreed.
You are fighting on all of those fronts. It's not just, you think, well, it's just, Trump is fighting Hillary, or Trump is fighting Biden. No. You have all this internal stuff. You're dead on right. And so because that also diffuses the focus of the grassroots people.
Yes, it does.
And so
it does.
And then you have infighting within the groups themselves.
Yes,
and
sir.
before you know it, the whole place is kind of a wreck. So one of my jobs and one of the reasons I'm coming here is I'm trying to bring you a focal point that you can come together around, focus on that point, and we can shoot you forward. And I got to tell you, Floyd County has got one of the best grassroots teams I've come across. They're a phenomenal team. And so really, I can tell you that from a national perspective, it's a great team. So all they really need is a little guidance. I like to think of myself as an arm dealer. I come in and I give them the right ammunition,
right?
And I think I can accelerate a lot of election reform progress in their county because they already have all the other infrastructure. A lot of places I go, they don't have any grassroots people. It's like I have to wake them up,
right?
And that's a really good group there. So
yes, sir.
That's what I'm doing here.
Some of the best I've ever seen, and
me too.
And I think this region, because we've dealt with a lot of Second Amendment and constitutional issues. That was the first thing that got us woke up in this area before, of course, the 2020 election. So we already had a strong grassroots movement, kind of rallying around the Second Amendment, the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And a lot of us counties were just hand in hand together, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, and it just killed the momentum. It killed everything around us.
What a brilliant strategy.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
What a brilliant strategy to shoot down the grassroots.
Yeah.
I was with Patrick Byrne A couple weeks ago, we did an event together in Dayton, Ohio.
Wow.
And he got up and he said that we're in the middle of a color revolution. Our country
Yes.
is. And he said the only reason that it hasn't succeeded already is because Americans have guns.
That's correct.
And so we have really our activism in that category has really helped to us to maintain our country, at least to some degree. I don't like telling people that we're fighting to save our country because I think it misrepresents the situation.
Okay.
I think we've already lost our country. We're trying to get our country back right now. And if you don't believe me, just go down to your local election official and ask if you can look at their machines. Okay? And they're going to say no. Okay? And basically, those are our elections.
Right.
And that's our constitutional voice. And they have taken that away from us.
Right.
And guess what? That constitutional voice is how we protect our Second Amendment and how we protect all of our other rights. So
That's right.
we have already lost our country. We have to get it back.
Sure. All you got to do is look back in history, and you can see, famine taking the security, the way to protect yourself away, and you can control entire populations of people.
And that's where they're headed.
So yeah, we've got some major things going on in the world. Yeah. So give us kind of a bird's eye view that you're looking at now. So we're in March, and we've got a huge election coming up in November. So
yeah, you got maybe an even more important one coming up in May.
That is true. The primary.
The primary is where the elections are really decided, not the general. Sure, presidential is the general, but. Yes. The primary is really where we have dropped the ball. Okay. Because that's where they're weeding out the grassroots candidates. Okay. And what happens is establishment or people that are status quo people, they end up maintaining the control. And our opposition will divide the vote. We'll have too many of us in the election. We don't have enough party discipline. And really, that's a consequence of the fact that for decades, we have been not participating in politics. We've become conditioned.
You're 100% right.
Out of it. And so, for decades, we've been letting other people run our elections. We've been letting other people teach our children and letting other people be the government. So we have a shallow bench. We have no experience or little experience. Right. It's so refreshing for me to join people from Floyd. They have 3 years of experience. A lot of places I come into, they don't even have 2 weeks. And it's like I have to start over. And there's so much to learn. So that's what we're really up against, I think. We have to wake everybody up to realize what's happened and to reclaim our elections. Sure. It's your constitutional voice you've lost. You got to recover it.
Absolutely.
I think that and what he says there about the primaries being so important is a point that's worth mentioning again, because I know in Floyd County now, the sheriff race is one of the things going on, and we're starting to see a lot of signs and a lot of talk going on about the sheriff's race. And so we have this Dave Robertson, who's the current sheriff, signs going up all over the place, and we have a challenger to him now, Robbie Whitfield, that is coming up to run against him, and that race is going to be won in the primary, but the majority of the vote is going to come out, in the presidential election, and when there will be, 50-60% of the county. Most people come out to vote then. They don't vote in the primary, and so if the challenger there is taken out during the primary, then a lot of people wouldn't even know that there was any alternative, because it's not going to be on the ballot whenever everybody else comes out to vote. So that's an important point that I think people need to really understand how the process works.
Right. There's another. Thank you for bringing that up too. There's another really important principle with the primaries. In the general election, the turnout is larger. 60-70% of the public turns out for that. But in the primary, it's low. It's only like 20%. So which election is easier to cheat?
Exactly.
The primary is way easier to cheat. You don't have to buy nearly as many ballots to tip any of those small elections. Right. They're decided by only 100 ballots instead of by 10,000 ballots. Gotcha. And so there's so many things working against us. It's super. And it's funny because people think the primary isn't as important. They focus on the general, but that's actually where you decide your school boards and where you decide your sheriffs and where you decide your county commissioners. All those super important offices are decided at that point.
Absolutely. We've taken a lot of us are, for example, I do candidate Mondays here where we're taking so many candidates and sitting down and letting them talk to the people, because there's this huge misconception from people like us that others that are kind of outside looking in are saying, well, because you're talking about 2020, because you're talking about all these things, you're basically telling people not to vote and all these kinds of things. And I cannot stand to hear that, because one of the most important things we all have to do is vote, regardless of what machine it's on or how things are. We have got to get more people involved in this so that they can't even overwhelm us with their algorithms. We are the people. We did it in 2016, right? I mean,
Oh, that's another story. I can
it
tell
is.
you if you want to hear
Well,
it.
sure, but am I right about that? I mean, we're trying to get people out to vote.
Everybody needs to vote.
Absolutely.
And since we're on the primary thing, there's a county in southern Washington. It's called Clark County. They're right adjacent to Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
So the southernmost county in the state of Washington. And in the primary in 2022, a bunch of the churches got together and they organized, and they turned out 70,000 more people than anybody was expecting. And they swept every race in the primary.
Wow.
That is a huge thing. And that is, do we need to vote? Yes. Absolutely. But they voted overwhelmingly. There's no way you can cheat that.
Exactly.
And so the challenge is, you have to get people to just not turn out. You need to get people to really turn out.
Exactly.
You need a massive turnout, or you can't overcome the cheat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a limit to how much you can cheat,
Sure.
and there's also limits in the system, how much credit line there is.
Right.
So, for example, you brought up 2016.
Sure.
And it's maybe too technical to get into on this, but basically the way they're stealing our elections is you make sure that your voter rolls are really dirty. What does that mean? That means you have tons of people in the rolls who are not real voters. Okay.
Right.
Then during the election, this is where the machines come in. The machines report what the tallies are in real time. So in real time, you know who's voted and how many people have voted and what the tallies are. And then after the election, you clean up the evidence. So it's just you fill the rolls, you do reconnaissance and tracking and stuffing, and then you clean up afterwards. That's the main way that our elections are being stolen. So imagine if one of those elements is missing. And that's what was happening in 2016, is that during the election 2016, 3 days leading up to it, a group of white hat hackers launched what's called a denial of service attack. Mm-hmm. That's when too many people are trying to get into a machine at once. Well, they set up a virus that was basically attacking all the machines and asking service requests. So what happened was the bad guys didn't know where they stood in the election.
Wow.
For 3 days leading up to 2016. Therefore, that's so they didn't know how much to stuff. You didn't know, how are we ahead, are we behind, or what?
Yes.
And so they stuffed ballots only according to what they thought was going to win, and Trump outperformed that. Mm-hmm. And so that's why he won, and that's why Hillary refused to concede, and why she went around screaming for 4 years that the Russians hacked our elections.
Right.
Okay? And she went around telling everybody that our elections were stolen. Mm-hmm. And so, wait a minute, Dr. Frank, you mean the Democrats think there's election fraud too? Yes, this isn't a Democrat-Republican issue.
It's not.
The
yes.
Democrats complained for 4 years. Now we're complaining for 4 years. What are we going to do? Keep going back and forth, or are we going to fix the problem?
Sure.
And the problem is that we're not in control of our elections. Mm-hmm. The states are in control, and then the Fed is in control.
Sure.
You need to control your elections at the local level. So I rambled a little bit there, but that's what happened in 2016, and then people say, well, why didn't we do the same thing in 2020, Dr. Frank? And the answer is we did. Which is why at 11 o'clock at night they had to turn off the election and reboot it.
Right.
Because they needed to find out where they stood, and the denial of service attack had denied information. And so that's why when they turned the election back on, you could look at the state of Michigan, the curve kind of goes up and then it goes straight up after that, because they added 156,000 new voters to the rolls who all voted. And so that's the cheat, is really they just add voters and stuff ballots. That's the main cheat. They don't usually flip ballots. We have a few examples of that, but not a whole lot. Most of the time it's just stuffing, which is the oldest way to cheat there is.
Sure. I ask everybody this question a lot concerning voter integrity. Have you ever seen a documentary, Kill Chain? I think I
Of course I saw that, yeah.
So
yeah.
It's phenomenal to me how that documentary, that HBO, was actually a series of about 3 documentaries going all the way back to like 2003.
Yeah.
And when it was released during COVID, 2019, 2020, and then as soon as 2020 happens, it's like, oh my God, we've got to get this out of here. Mm-hmm. And when I first started broadcasting, I did an entire episode on Kill Chain and immediately got struck for even talking about it. And now if you even share a link to it, it's like you're targeted. And I tell people, you don't understand. You think that we're crazy for talking about these things. Why don't you go watch the documentary? Start at kind of the kill chain era and see what was going on there. And now to come back and tell me that we're not onto something, I mean.
Well, and you're in Georgia.
I know.
Where the curling case is.
Yes.
Where Professor
Yes.
Halderman hacked into a machine right in front of the judge, a month ago?
Right in front of the judge.
Okay, and guess who hired Professor Halderman? Hillary Clinton. In 2017.
That's
okay, right. And why did she do that? Because it was the Democrats complaining about how our machines are not secure. So he was hired, University of Michigan, to go around the country and analyze all the machines. And lo and behold, he came to Georgia for a lawsuit, revealed how all your machines are vulnerable and hackable. And by the way, when that first went to, what was it, 2017 when that first came?
I think so.
Exactly. Well, that's because that was Hillary had hired him. The judge immediately sealed his report.
Sealed it for what, 2 years?
You know why he sealed it? Because it tells you how to hack into all the machines.
Exactly.
And so now the good guys don't know how, but the bad guys already do.
Absolutely.
And so it's sort of like passing gun laws. Criminals don't follow the gun laws.
No, of course not.
So
and then I went down in January and joined the Paper Please, and we did a lot of filming and asking questions.
I was there at the Capitol.
And you were there too?
At the Paper Please Day. Yeah.
Okay, I was there too. I didn't even see you.
Remember I led you guys singing, "Oh, my country, 'tis of thee."
Oh, that was the other one. Okay,
that was another Paper
Yeah,
Please
that
one.
was
Okay.
the one. I missed that one. I went to another one.
Yeah.
And we actually filmed like our legislators, which they were caught completely off guard. But guess how many of them knew what the Halderman report was?
How many?
Probably 1 out of the 6 that we talked about, maybe.
Well, who was paying you to do all that?
Nobody. They thought we were paid opposition there, that we had bought, that somebody was funding us, and I'm like, dude, I took a day off to come down here and hang, so
It just blows their mind, that people were actually concerned enough about what's going on in our state and our elections.
How can you be a legislator in Georgia and not know what the Halderman report is? That is mind blowing.
It is. It very much is. So.
Well, this also comes from the same, group of legislators that say that they haven't been getting any calls about election integrity,
that too.
and that they don't know what we're talking about. What is all this?
Yeah.
They haven't heard anything.
You're in the belly of the beast.
A lot of deflection there.
Yeah, a lot.
So give us your take on curling. So I know you've been keeping up a little bit with it. We all have.
In fact, I saw copies before they were public because I was involved with some of the people and I had to sign NDAs. And I got to see all that stuff.
Wow, okay.
Early on. I've been in many lawsuits and testified. You were talking about who's paying you to do that. I was testifying before the Kansas legislature a couple of years ago. And one of the first questions one of the legislators asked is he slammed his fist on the table. He says, "Who's paying you to do this?" And it was so refreshing. I could just turn around and say, "See, these people, they bought my plane ticket. Nobody's paying me to do this."
Right.
That gives me credibility, I think, that people know I'm not doing this for money. But anyway, so when we talk about the Halderman report, basically the Halderman report especially focuses on, because it was for Georgia, focuses on the Dominion systems and the ICX machines. It doesn't talk so much about the electronic poll books, which is where I think the major problem is. The machines are the tabulators and the EMS, election management machines. The ICX, that's the one where you touch it and it prints a ballot for you that you then put into a machine.
Okay.
That is the most hackable machine in the country. Okay. It's the worst thing. And a lot of the times you'll hear people will say, your clerks or your election administrators, they'll say, "Oh, those machines can't connect to the internet." They're wrong.
Of course.
They do. We have taken forensic images of those machines. You might have heard of that from Mesa County, Colorado.
Yes.
Tina Peters, I was very involved in that.
Okay.
I'm the one that arranged for that. And so, let me just fix this.
You got plenty you can pull. So.
Yeah. And the first thing we found when we did forensic images of her machines, same machines as you have, so we found 36 modems that were talking on the internet throughout the election.
Right.
And we have the logs of it. And you might say, well, that's Colorado, that's not Georgia. Oh yeah. Well, Mr. Lindell's first movie was called Absolute Proof, and he has recordings into every one of your counties of the communications going on in the elections. The second movie he made was called Scientific Proof. That's about my work. But the third movie is called Absolute Interference. In the last 20 minutes of that documentary, every Georgian should watch, because it's specifically about a Georgia situation where in 2020, It was a telecom young man installing 5G on top of the telephone poles. And he noticed that, I mean, what do you do when you install electronics? You install it and you test it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was testing and he was like, wait a minute, what's all this traffic coming from this polling place down here? And so he hooked up a special little controller and screen and he started reading all this traffic that was coming in. And it was tally, voting machine 1, this is the tally. Voting machine 2, these are the tallies. Voting machine 3. It was telling the tallies on all the voting machines in real time. God. And he was like, wait a minute, this is not legal.
Right.
So he went down to Micro Center and he bought a bunch of small Raspberry Pi computers.
Right.
And then he recorded your runoff election in 5 precincts in your state.
Good
and
Lord.
So, in other words, it's not just
Right.
Mesa County. You have the same machines here.
Mm-hmm.
You have the same problem here.
Sure.
And so then people say to me, but why is the machine reporting it? Who cares? Well, it's because if you're going to steal an election, let's say, Roy, that you're running for election and you're behind 8 to 10, and so you go out and you look up 4 people who haven't voted, you print ballots for them, and you turn them in drop boxes or you mail them in or whatever. Okay, well, first of all, you needed to know what the tally was.
Sure.
That you were
Gotcha.
behind. That's why the machines are. Second, you needed to know who didn't vote yet. And so that's why the poll books are online. So in other words, you need that reconnaissance to cheat the election.
Sure.
So that's where the machines are coming in, and that's what we've proven is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a horrible situation. What you're supposed to have is one day of voting where people show up in
Yes,
person
yes.
and vote on paper. And the reason it's a short period of time is so that you don't have funny business beforehand and you don't have
Right.
funny business afterwards.
Right.
It's everybody can control everything. Everybody shows up. Everybody watches.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's transparent. You count the ballots. Everybody watching at the end. And then that's what should be.
That sounds so simple.
It's cheap, too. It's way cheaper than what you're paying. I'll tell you that.
Wow, it's amazing to me that we can sit here and look back on this in hindsight and just realize like how it's complex, but how simple it all is when you get down to everything, like how this works. I mean, we have a secretary of state, and I'll give you an example. In our state now, our legislature was voting on a bill last week that we're going to put people in jail and fine them for using artificial intelligence and these in ads and things like that. And my biggest problem with that, I mean, besides the First Amendment, was very simple. You're telling me that I should focus on some sort of artificial election, commercial, when you have completely ignored every single bit of evidence or proof or anything. We don't even have a case finished up in this state, but you want me to be supportive of you putting people like me in prison. It's insane to me.
I think it's also indicative of something. I gave a talk in Massachusetts, Lexington, Massachusetts last year. It's my second time at this big church there. And on the right side of the, stage right, on the right side, there were all these Chinese people in the audience. And I hadn't had an audience like that before. So afterwards, I went up and said, hey, what's going on, guys? And they said, we're all Chinese immigrants. We've all come from China. And everything that's happening to you now happened to us during the Cultural Revolution. You guys just don't recognize it. You're all asleep. You need to wake up. Okay. And a month later, I was in Southern California, and a bunch of Cubans told me the same thing. The reason I bring that up, though, is because exactly what you described is exactly they're taking away your free speech. So what one of my main focuses as I'm on the road is to wake people up, to help them realize what's going on. I use data and evidence for that. But really, I'm trying to remind them, the First Amendment says you have these 5 freedoms guaranteed to you. Don't give them up.
Right.
And here your own government is saying, how dare you question this? In fact, if you do question it, we're going to put you in jail. Excuse me.
Exactly.
Okay. First of all, freedom. Maybe that's not a freedom of religion thing, but that's definitely a freedom of the press.
Yes.
That's freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, because you're going to get together and protest these things and to redress with the government. I mean, those are all the things you're wanting to do.
Exactly.
And those, if they say, we're going to put you in jail, you need to say, bring it. Bring it.
I agree.
I'm ready to go. But what I always encourage people to do is not just be the only one on the steps.
Gotcha.
You
Well,
need
of course.
50 people together, then they have to leave you alone.
I agree.
And so you're nullifying their stupid laws.
Absolutely, and it goes back down to the local level. We need local
Yes.
sheriffs, we need commissioners, we need people that are going to stand up to this
Yes.
federalization and say, hey, we're not going to let you mess with our people, And we've got some good people that are pushing this kind of legislation. We have a SAPA bill that is in the works, that we can't get any traction on. And it's a sad state of affairs in this state. I mean, really it is. So.
Yeah, I think it's important what he says there about that because it's really the people. We've been calling on our legislators and our commissioners and all these elected people to do their job,
yep.
and what we elected them to do, but they're not doing it. And
sure.
So it's up to us, the people, and like Dr. Frank says, we don't need 1 or 2 or 3 or 5. Mm-hmm. We need 50 or 100. We need so many people to show up at these places that it's really impossible for all of them to be arrested and all that kind of thing. Agreed. And that's what we have been fighting against, in Floyd County, and I know in Northwest Georgia in general, is just getting the regular people to show up and to be part of this, to put their actual boots on the ground.
Absolutely.
Just occasionally, don't have to be all the time, but just come to one commission meeting.
Sure.
Come to one GOP meeting. Do something to make that first social media post. Do something to get in the fight just a little bit.
I mean, every little bit. See what we're doing here. Yeah. This was not something I ever intended to be doing, and I'm sitting here doing it. So,
in the old days, we didn't go to the legislature if we had problems. The citizens got together, got the torches and the pitchforks, and they went out and tar and feathered these people.
Sure.
Okay, we've just become kind of like complacent and rolled over. We let them push us around, but we're the sovereigns. This country is set up where we are the leaders, and we hire people to serve us, to represent us. But it's upside down. And
absolutely.
And so we have a problem. We look to the legislature to fix it. Wrong. If we have a problem, we fix it.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be acting that way, but we've all been kind of conditioned out of this. And I'm raising my hand, mea culpa. I was that way too.
Sure.
Yeah, I had to wake up, and I didn't wake up till 2020. But boy, oh boy, am I awake now.
Well, I mean, you look at our current situation in our economy and our livelihoods, which I'm not talking about where we're at with inflation, right? Who can afford houses now and the price of food, but we've been conditioned in this system, I believe, to where everything has been run on credit. Every register you go into, hey, take this credit and get 15%, until we've built up so much debt that we're kind of enslaved in this system where we cannot get out of debt, and we just keep buying, and then before you know it, you're working your entire life away when you could be making a difference, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs that we've let ourselves get into with our monetary system.
Absolutely,
I hate it, but who knows where that's going to end up? Really.
The solution is at the local level. I like what Greasy Boots said there. He's absolutely right. I spent all of 2021 trying to fix it from the top down, testifying before legislators, meeting with the secretaries of state, attorneys generals, and nothing happens when you do that. Even when you hack into their elections right in front of their face, nothing happens. But so I'm not stupid, and I like what Einstein says. He says insanity. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different result. Yeah. So I'm not going to keep doing that, right? But I learned a lesson. It took me a year, but then I spent most of 2022 learning from people like Greasy Boots how to fight a grassroots war. And boy, I've been reading books like crazy. I've been reading Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals.
Oh man, what a read!
I know, and there are so many good.
That's the playbook, really.
It really is. And it works.
That was Hillary Clinton. That was what her thesis in college was all on Saul Alinsky's, and I've told people about that. And it's like you've got to read it to believe it. That this is a multifunctional, layered plan that they are just doing to a T. To a T.
And so, but the thing is the reason they're doing it is because it works.
Because it works, right?
And so, guess what I've learned the hard way, and it took me a while to figure it out, but I'm there now. I'm doing it the easy way. Now I'm reading the books. Right. I was learning it myself as I went along, and I noticed some principles. And I wait a minute, these are all in this book over here. Maybe I better read this book.
Right.
And so I've been speeding up my progress working with grassroots by reading grassroots from the other side. I'm reading the books that all their playbooks. We're going to use the same playbooks on them that they've been using on us.
We have to,
and they're working.
Yeah, fight fire with fire.
This is why I'm here working with these guys, because they are the solution right there. You're looking at it.
Well, your work is invaluable. I mean, I can't tell you how much we appreciate the fact that you're even around here. It's great to have.
It's an honor to be with you. I think this is the beachhead in your state.
Well,
and what I mean by that is this is the place where there's a locus of conservative patriots who are willing to make a stand. And that's all it takes.
Sure.
An irate minority, as Sam Adams said. And so if we can... You have that here. Right. So let's make a stand and tell the state to go pound sand. We're not using your stupid systems anymore because they're disenfranchising us from our God-given natural rights enumerated in the Constitution. We're not using your stupid systems anymore. We're gonna run our own elections. Thank you very much. Go pound sand.
There you go. I want to bring this one point up that I told you earlier without naming names or anything. I was in a meeting earlier today, and it was brought up about paper ballots. And in the meeting, they wanted to vote on paper. And so me and a couple of my colleagues are sitting there, and he's like, "What do you think it's going to be?" And I said, "Well, I think it's going to pass." I said, "But it might be a little close, you know." He said, "I don't know. Looking in this room, I don't know." But anyway, we did the voting on the paper ballots, and it passed by almost a split. I'm not right 50-50, but it was at least, 60-40, 70-30. And I expected that because here in this area we have so many people, I think, that we discussed that are kind of, they don't want to get out of their lane. They want to stay where they're at. They're very uncomfortable fighting the system, very uncomfortable getting out of their skin. What do we need to kind of tell these people, or what are you telling these people that you're running, these skeptics that are calling us a bunch of crazies, We get that a lot over here.
So that'd be like maybe the good old boys club kind of folks that know some of the, maybe they're not a commissioner, maybe they're not actually involved, but they know somebody, they're kind of benefiting from it, they're getting a contract, they're, in some way benefiting from it, so they don't want to, disrupt anything. Yeah, we see a lot of that.
I thought about that today on the way there. I thought, even in the closed door rooms with their closest friends, I could see every one of these people admitting, "Oh yeah, the election's messed up, but I'm not going to get involved in that." And I mean,
it's like the third rail of politics. They stay away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing. I was with a group of patriots today, grassroots patriots, and I'm going to give them a copy of their voter rolls.
Okay.
And I've arranged their voter rolls in a certain way that makes it really easy for them to evaluate residence by residence. Why am I doing that? Because then when the citizens in a community are objecting to the system, they can point to actual examples of fraud. They're not talking about what Mr. Lindell said. They're not talking about what Mr. Trump said or what Dr. Frank said. They're saying, we have knocked on these doors and look, this is actual fraud that's actually happened here. So I'm equipping them with evidence. But you mentioned the paper ballots, and it brings up a really important point. The way you're voting right now is unauditable, and it's not transparent. So I was sitting at the table with these beautiful patriots, and one of them said, "Well, gee, would you look up my address for me?" And so I looked it up, and you could see everybody in the house who voted, and it listed that one of the people who lived there, it says in the rolls that they didn't vote. But they said, no, he voted. We saw that he voted. So in other words, there's no paper record who voted. Think about that. So there's no way to know.
Right.
And all you have to do to change an election is just add a few voters or remove a few voters. And wait a minute, there's no paper record. There's no way to verify whether or not they voted or not. So in other words, you're signing in on an electronic poll pad. You guys use the no ink pads, which is on the internet. So the whole world knows within 7 minutes every person who's voted in Georgia.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so, and I don't know you very well yet. I just met you today, Roy, but you know what? I bet you I know if I saw that you voted, I bet you didn't vote for Hillary. And so I could probably predict, if I have a list of everybody who voted, I can probably predict where the election's going.
Gotcha.
And nobody denies that that's online and that everybody has access to that. So that's sort of an interesting situation. So you need to have, now in my state in Ohio, when I come in to vote, they do have that electronic check-in, but they also have a paper poll book, and I have to sign right next to my name there.
Okay.
So that's a written record that I was there.
Gotcha.
And then they hand me a paper ballot that I fill out that then, yes, they put through a tabulator. Okay. But you guys are worse.
Oh yes. I just voted on them.
You don't sign in on a piece of paper, so there's no paper record, there's no audit trail, there's no way to know whether you voted or not. You touch a screen and it prints a sheet of paper with this QR code on that you are so good at reading. I know you can read QR codes, you have the special eyes. And then you put that through a tabulator, which reads the QR code.
Right.
Okay. So you're not voting on paper.
No.
You're voting on a machine that's connected to the internet. That's what you're, and so your tally is immediately being reported too. So many, each phase of that is so vulnerable. How simple would it be if you just walked in the room and there was a book? We opened it up and said, "Oh, here's Roy. Sign here, Roy. You sign. Here's a ballot. Go stand in that booth over there. Fill it out. Put it in that box over there." Okay. We didn't spend any money on electricity. We didn't tell the world who voted. We didn't tell the world how you voted. And at the end of when the polls close, we bring that box over here and we all sit around a table, all under video camera, and we count out the ballots and count.
Absolutely.
And then that would be faster, cheaper, and everybody would trust that.
Sure.
What you're doing now, nobody trusts anymore.
Yeah,
Both sides.
It's been proven. I mean, the people are doing audits all the time around the state,
Yes.
trying to show how this is. I'll give you another example. Today, there was a story being told about back in the 90s how there was a local, not a local, but a Senate election, and they were kind of against paper ballots, right? And they were talking about how the ballots went through, everything was counted, and the very next day they found a box of ballots in a certain county, and they grabbed them, and it actually kind of changed the election a little bit. Okay, now in and of itself, it's like you scratch your head and you're thinking, well, this is my whole point. You found that box of elections, you had that paper trail, and so you were able to add it and redo it.
That's a good thing.
Because what they think is they think that we are mad because Donald Trump lost this election. And they could be no more further from the truth.
Right.
We are not, we want transparency.
If we lost fair and square, I'm good with it.
That is perfectly fine
I'm
with
good
me.
with it, yes. Then we work harder next time.
Through trying to prove their point against paper ballots, they actually prove the point that there is
Fair
paper,
point.
physical evidence that shows.
Fair point.
I'm just like, come on, man.
Well, they play these word games. That is what I've noticed with Secretary of State Raffensperger and Kemp and all, because they'll say and during the campaign is, "Oh yes, we're going to move for paper ballots." And I'll see it's that word game there because, well, it prints off a paper that you then put in the machine. And I've noticed the last few elections that they must be training the poll workers and all to, as I don't know if you've noticed it, Roy. When you vote and then go take the paper to put it in the machine, they're everyone's saying, all right, watch the little box. So when it moves up a number, then that way you can be assured that your vote counted. Just because that little box moved up one number, it's totally bypassing all these bigger issues that we're talking about with all this entire system. But at the surface level, for people that are uninitiated in this kind of stuff, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I seen the number go up one, so everything's
Since
good.
the number went up one, I must have voted.
Yeah.
Well, look what
and they
you're-
must have counted it right.
Yeah.
Your legislature, so it's kind of like they got they're feeding a duck, and they're just breaking off bits and pieces of the bread and acting like, oh, this is going to fix things.
Yes, what's that they have gotten. They've done that multiple times. It seems like in the last few years that we've been doing this. With the SB 202 things, like, oh, okay. We hear all the complaints. All right, we're going to fix it. Here's SB 202. This will fix all the problems. When it's not. It does a thing or two here and there, but it really bypasses all of the main issues.
You go
and they do
back
it time after time.
When I first started this and they passed SB 202, I printed it off right in this room next to me, and I read it, and I was like, I cannot believe that we just passed this. Every single bit of this on paper should have already been done. Like, where were we? We were dead asleep. And I still, to this day, they were touting, oh, we fixed it.
No,
Buddy,
I can tell you for a fact. I've been, working all across the country. There isn't one legislature that's making our elections more secure.
No.
Every legislature is making them less secure. It's ubiquitous across the country. I want to come back to a comment here.
Sure.
When we're trying to come up with evidence that we can present that will convince our community members that we're not wackadoodles, we're not conspiracy wing nuts. When we're trying to come up with evidence, if we talk about the machines, we just sound like conspiracy theorists. Why? Because you don't get any access to the machines.
Right.
So you don't have any evidence to back up what you're saying. If you say, well, the machines are online, show me they're online. Can you do that? No. Well, then you sound like a wackadoodle. True. So that's different about what I do. Okay. I give you a copy of your own rolls.
Right.
That's provided by the Secretary of State, where they tell you everybody who voted and everybody who's registered. This is something you can do something with, that you can hold in your hand. This is why I focus on this. When you knock on a door and you discover that John Smith died 5 years ago, but it says in the rolls he voted this year, you've got hard evidence in your hand that the system is being manipulated. So that is a super important thing. So as we're discussing this in public, you'll notice I don't talk about the machines much.
Gotcha.
Because I think that just makes us look like wackadoodles. Now, Now, contrast that to, say, Mr. Lindell, Mike Lindell, who's a total patriot, is a total hero. What does he have in his hand? He has 100 terabytes of recordings of the elections being hacked. So, of course, he's talking about that. He's like, here's my evidence, everybody. So he knows the machine. So that's why that's been his focus.
Gotcha.
And so I'm not criticizing him at all, but I'm just simply saying, if all you do is run around and quote Mr. Lindell, you sound like a wackadoodle.
I got you.
Because they've painted him and marginalized him, painted him as a wackadoodle. So you don't help yourself. So I think the best way for local people to engage this battle is not by quoting Donald Trump, is not by quoting Mike Lindell, not by quoting Dr. Frank. The best way for local people to engage this battle is to get a copy of their rolls and find actual fraud in their own county and show how it's systemic as a consequence of the fact that you're using a state-controlled system rather than a local controlled system. That's what I teach people. So, and that's the evidence you have access to.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen the presentation you've done on the local levels too, and it is so eye-opening to see this, because that's one other thing I want to bring up is that a lot of, especially in our small towns and our communities, when you bring up election fraud, for example, we all know Atlanta has got 10 metro counties, right?
I'm so glad. I wanted to come to this point, so I'm glad you're introducing it.
When you bring it up, what do they think? They think it's a personal attack against their own job and their own county. Well, we know that our people up here are doing everything they can and doing it right. We're talking about concentrated areas where these kind of things can take place, and that's another barrier that we have up here.
That's a huge, huge point, and let me answer it in two ways. The first, whenever I go to, like, for example, tomorrow night when I'm in Floyd, I'm going to show evidence in Floyd.
Yes.
Why? Because everybody goes, oh, yeah, Atlanta, sure, there's lots of, oh, Fulton, oh, yeah, sure, there's lots, but our county, we're clean. We have good county officials, and so they think everything's peachy keen. Well, it's not. The reason it's not is not because you have corrupt local leaders or corrupt local election administrators. It's because it's a state system.
Gotcha.
And it's everywhere in the state, and people don't understand that. They think that their local clerk is controlling their local election. No, it's central control. Right. So that's the first thing that people need to wake up to that. So I show them their own evidence from their own town, and that opens their eyes. And then they realize, yeah, it is a state problem, isn't it? But there's also another level. I was in Cherokee County the other night, and beforehand, the local election administrator there, she came, her name's Ann Dover. She came with her assistant, and I was making nice with her ahead of time. One of the election board members asked me to talk with her, and so I started raising issues with her voter rolls and raising issues with her elections, and she totally lost it. She stood up and started screaming and yelling, I don't have to take this, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not talking anything bad about you. I'm talking about the system that you're using. But she takes it personally. She thinks I'm attacking her. And so she went all off. She just lost it. And she and her assistant just stormed out of the room. That's another huge problem with this. You have the people that are asleep, but they're starting to wake up. And then you have an administrative level who don't understand technology, who just want to try to get by, and the system is very complicated, so they feel overwhelmed. I mean, if it were a simple system, they could all do it, no problem.
Right.
But it's a complicated system, so they feel overwhelmed. They're so busy dotting every I, crossing every T, going through every checklist, that they feel threatened. So I come in and I say, well, what about this problem? And they're like, don't even raise that problem. I got these 10 problems to work on. They feel overwhelmed, and so then when you start asking questions, they feel like you're attacking them personally. And that's a whole nother level. I don't think those people are evil. I just think I don't know how to say this. And if I say incompetent, it sounds like I'm being derogatory.
Right.
That is not their skill. Don't ask me to do, I'm really good at math and science and engineering and computer programming. I'm good at that stuff, okay? There are some things I'm not good at basket weaving. Don't ask me to weave baskets. I suck at that, okay? And I think a lot of these middle-level managers, these election officials, they're not technical experts. And you're asking them to run technical machines. The best they can do is just follow checklists.
Right.
And so there's sort of useful pawns in the system.
Wow.
If that makes sense. Anyway, there you go.
Now, I will give you, today I met our new elections appointee that our GOP appointed, and I believe he's well aware. He knows who you are. He knows a lot of things, and he stood up today and said that they have stopped this this sending out the ballots through the mail. Like you have to go down and request a ballot and all these
Oh,
things.
that's a great step forward.
That is happening in this county now. That he has stopped this where they
That's
cannot
not
send
statewide.
out.
That's just your
That's
county.
just this
Da,
county.
da, da, da.
So-
That's the whole point I've been making. You win at the county
Exactly.
level. I need to meet this guy. What's his name?
Well, I will give it to you after the show.
Okay.
Scott Connors, I think, is his name.
Yeah.
I haven't got to really meet him.
Yeah.
We just talked for a minute, but he did stand up and say because.
But
we
he's
had,
new.
Oh yeah, he's new.
So
Oh,
he's
yeah.
you're not going to pin the
He's taking
2020
it-
election on him.
No, he's taking this very seriously.
Oh, I got to
so-
meet this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get it into you. I want to ask too, since talking about meat, have you met our Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger yet? Have you been with him? Or
I
around him?
have not. We offered. I flew around with Mike Lindell in his jet for about 3 weeks straight back in 2021 and met with many secretaries of states and AGs during that time. And the reason we were doing that is because we were getting signatures for our Supreme Court case.
Okay.
And we offered to him, and no, he was not interested.
Gotcha.
And so we were looking for ones that we thought we could get to sign on, but they've kind of hunkered down here, and they
yes.
don't want to talk to anybody from the outside,
No.
especially us, because when we show up, we hack into their elections right in front of their face, and then they have no retreating ground, right?
Right, yeah.
They're culpable now, because now that we know, they know.
Sure, he dodges us quite a bit too. Anybody that's around anywhere, he's running through back rooms and elevators trying to get away from everybody.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
oh man. Okay, so what we're gonna do? We're nearing an hour, so we are going to go through the comments. Wow, we've got some decent comments tonight.
Yeah.
That looks like Charles Stoker. That's his MO. Charles, you're gonna have to shorten it, buddy. Let's go. Let's see.
He wrote an essay there.
Tracy Lee Muir, thank you for watching. Angela Rubino, awesome. What's up, Angela? Hello, my beautiful Patriot
she's one of my
friends.
favorites.
Yes,
she's a great lady. I was with her this afternoon. She
yes,
cooked
we
me
love
some
Angela.
amazing pasta.
Oh man, I haven't even got to get the pasta yet.
She
so
knows how to make it the pasta. You
You
know,
are not kidding. You are not kidding.
it was wonderful.
Tracy says, "Hey, my pal. Yes. Let's see. Alfred Stephen Bryant says, remember the red wave in 2022. We need voters to turn out regardless of who they think is going to win."
I want to tell you about the red wave. The red wave was a controlled opposition.
Oh, you're 100% right.
It's what they told everybody. Don't worry about it. Just turn out in big numbers, okay? You don't win that way. You need to fix the elections, and it's there's sort of an implicit assumption in it that the reason we lost in 2020 was because there wasn't any fraud. We just didn't harvest ballots as well as the Democrats. But this time we've got a big red wave coming. It's just a way to try to get everybody to not get worked up. It's controlled opposition.
I always tell people, I said, we all see 2020. I said, but look at the numbers from 2022 in this state alone, and it is a head scratcher how those turned out. How on earth a Republican governor could win by 2 million votes, but then we lose every runoff election? Like, there's something not right there.
I show this graph in my talks. You have more people in the 2022 election than you had in any of your prior federal elections, excepting for 2020. I mean, it's a massive stuffing going on.
Oh yeah. It's mind blowing.
Dr. Frank was showing us earlier today about the, and he'll explain it better than I do, but the how many are added to the voter rolls and then taken off the voter rolls and then added back, and how much they fluctuate. It's impossible to know. And I remember looking in the past with 159 counties in Georgia, it was something like 11,000, almost 12,000 votes that Trump supposedly lost by, and it was only something like, it was less than 100 per county that it took. It was 70 something, I think. Votes per county is all it took to get to that almost 12,000 number. So it doesn't take that many. And even like in Floyd County, when we had the 2,800, whatever, missing ballots and all that, again, we're talking about 70 and all that. So that's so few really in the grand scheme of things that it's impossible. Even if you knew that was going on, how are you going to scan through these 60,000 or so votes to find the 70 or 100 that could be the fraudulent ones, and maybe there's probably more than that, but that's really all that's needed. So it's, the guys or the people that are perpetuating this fraud and making all this happen. This isn't their first rodeo, so to speak. They've been at it for a while. They know what they're doing, and they're always 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. We're always playing catch up.
Remember what the WEF has
correct.
already said. They said, well, artificial intelligence will run your next election. There's no telling what they have in store.
That's
you know?
right.
So,
I was just in Floyd, and I showed them their numbers. They have about 60,000 people in their voter rolls. And what I showed them is that between 2020 and 2022, their voter rolls shrunk by about 5,000 and grew by 8,000. Okay, that's a big swing. And it's it's 12%, something like that. But what's interesting is that I showed them all their past elections. And if you look at the Secretary of State numbers for, say, the 2014 election, and the list of who voted, because I have downloaded the list of everybody who voted for every county in Georgia. I have it on my computer. I can count them up. I can count them out. They're within 3 or 4 every election, except the 2020 election. They're missing about 500 voters from the list. So there are 500 people who you counted ballots from in Floyd, and you don't know who they're from. That's very interesting. And then he mentions he's right on the money. All you need is 70 ballots for county. I just showed them 8,000 people were removed from the rolls after the election. And you only need
That's
70
way
of
more
those
than
to be
70.
fraudulent ballots.
Exactly.
So the fact that the local people are not in control of the rolls is a huge problem.
Right.
The local person needs to add voters. The local person needs to remove voters, and the local person needs to control who gets a ballot, which your guy is doing.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a great
Yes,
thing.
sir.
I'm so glad to hear that.
yes, absolutely.
That's good. Good thing.
All
Thanks
right.
for bringing that up.
Lisa Adams, great to see you tonight. Alfred Stephen Bryan says, I remember when James O'Keefe did something similar to show Act Blue donations coming from addresses. He went
Yes.
door to door to verify if they
Yes.
did donate thousands of dollars, and a lot of residents didn't know a thing.
And that's why we go knock on the doors.
Absolutely.
We say, hey, it shows in the voter rolls that 5 people live here. And you show it to them, and they're like, no, it's just me and Mama. Who are those other people?
Yep.
And by the way, they voted. What?
Yeah.
How?
I think it was Steven Crowder that got kicked off for doing a massive voter where they went into the addresses
Yes.
and they were going around and they were sending like 5 or 6 people out, and the address came up to like an underpass on the interstate. You know?
Well, that could be a homeless
Crazy.
person, and that's legal.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah. Don't get me started there. Kim's Coffee Talk. Good to see you this evening. Paper ballots, please. I
Yes,
agree.
yes.
She says, early vote or not, your opinion. So I'm of the opinion. Now, I've early voted because my work schedule allows me to, right? I don't believe in early voting. I think, like you said, it's a window of opportunity to kind of pre-plan, kind of preload things. But,
Yes.
I believe in one-day voting.
Yeah, I always tell people vote Amish, and I
Yeah.
got that idea of vote Amish because in Ohio on Election Day in 2020, 60,000 Amish people came out for the very first time and voted in person, on paper, on Election Day. That's what you should be doing.
Heck
You should
yeah.
be voting Amish. Now, the problem with voting early, if it's a small percentage, and there's legitimate reasons for voting early and voting absentee. You're in the military, you're a jet pilot, and you're not in town. There's a legitimate reasons, but historically, it's like 1% of the population can't make it to the polls for legitimate reasons.
Right.
Okay, everybody else should have to vote in person.
Agreed.
And by trying to make it convenient for everybody, we've only decreased the turnouts actually, and we've sacrificed the integrity of the election for convenience. We should Who said voting should be easy?
It shouldn't be. It should be a national date, if you ask me.
Exactly. I mean,
Close down everything.
If you can go to the grocery store, you can
Yes.
vote, and most everybody seems to be able to do that. If there are a few exceptions, fine, we can make a few exceptions, but a few exceptions you can police carefully.
I do agree.
Now, voting early is a bad idea. Because when you vote early, you tell the bad guys how many ballots they need to stuff.
Exactly.
You're giving
Exactly.
away
You're
the
giving the
information necessary to steal the election. Don't vote early. But then people will say, well, gee, but if I don't vote early, well, somebody else might steal my ballot. I want to bank my vote. Well, wait a minute. That you just admitted there's a huge problem with your elections, did you? But anyway, if you wait till election day and you walk into the polls and say, give me my ballot, I want to vote, and they say, sorry, you already voted, you just proved a case of fraud. And I'm sorry you lost your vote, but guess what? I'm glad you lost your vote because you just proved to the world that your election's being stolen from you. So that's a fraudulent case. Also, the later you vote like that at the election day, the more your vote can matter. Because you're not giving the other side a chance to nullify it. So early voting is a bad idea. And guess who supports it? The GOP is promoting it all over the place.
They very
And,
much are.
RNC is promoting it all over the place. And it's a bad idea. That should tell you, that alone, it tells you where the GOP and the RNC stand in my book.
Agreed.
Let me mention one
Sure.
more thing too while we're on that note. Just happened in Floyd County with this recent vote. The new election supervisor, Floyd has always been kind of notorious for being late in announcing the results of the election. Well, this time, in this one we just had, I think the Floyd County reported to the Secretary of State at like 7:02 or 7:05 or something. I think we're the first one or one of the first ones.
Polls closed at 7. They
Polls closed
reported
at 7. They
7:02.
reported at 7:02. Now, how does that happen if they're not connected to the internet? If there's none of this kind of stuff going on, like he's talking about, they counting the ballots ahead of time, or somehow they know ahead of time
Sure.
when you vote early. So by voting on day of and waiting until later in the day to do it, then you don't give them that opportunity as much.
Absolutely. I do agree.
The Dominion machines you have the ability to report the tallies at the end of the election. It depends how you read the state law. The federal law does not allow you to have a machine to use in your elections that can be on the internet.
Okay.
But you could interpret that. You could say, well, we've turned the modem off during the election, so it can't be on the internet. There's like a little gray area there. But the minute the polls close, they can flip on and they can report. And a lot of states like it that way because then they don't have to take the little drive out and run down to the central place and turn in the drive. That's how they're able to report it instantly because it's all done ahead of time. I mean, it comes on. So that's another confirmation, by the way, that your machines are not safe and that they have modems in it that are reporting things. Go ahead.
It's also interesting,
wild.
that our director of elections and I personally have had the conversation with her. The machines are not connected to the internet, but then this happens. It's hard to understand how people that are supposed to be in the business of running elections can't put this together. That
What is it? A financial institution owns Dominion now? I mean, was it State Street or whatever? They're not even owned by like, the original Dominion. So
Yeah.
All right, Georgia Patriot says, good to have you this evening. Georgia was the first state to be in compliance with the electronic voting standards.
I think he's talking about the 2002 HAVA, because that's when Help America Vote Act, that's when the federal government went to the states and said, we don't want any more hanging chads. We want you to get rid of that old stuff. We want you to switch over to electronic machines. And the states basically uniformly said, we're not doing that. That's going to be too expensive. So the federal government said, we're going to help. We're going to give you grants and give you all this money so that you can buy all the machines you need. Basically, you're selling your election. You're giving away your election. They're giving us equipment, but basically you're letting other people control the election now. So to be in compliance, one of the first states to be in compliance with the standards, I don't think that's a badge of honor.
No.
I think that you're the first sellout is what I think that is.
Right.
you know how much these states and localities like to get these grants too. You know,
Oh, Georgia loves grants.
It's got to be a good thing. We're getting money.
You're getting money for it.
And then, the contract for Dominion, when they bought it, and then, I think it was a year or 2 years, the state took the bill, and then all of a sudden the counties got dumped.
Yep.
I think in this county alone, we're paying like $30,000 a year alone just for the maintenance and upkeep in Dominion. So,
That doesn't include all the special phone lines that you have to have for the poll books, for example, and there's tons of other expenses. You're paying a lot of money for your elections, and way more than you would pay if it was on paper.
agreed with that. He says, we are the only state that keeps recycling our secretaries of state into the governor's mansion. Well, it's like a churning factory, actually. So,
Helping America Cheat Act.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
and yes, Georgia's a founding father of electronic election assistance. Our officials have been helping other states get it going since 2002.
That's when HAVA was passed. Yep.
Yep. It said, Alfred says exactly, I used to work in IT, and there are so many people that don't understand how technology works.
Let me talk about that for a second.
Sure.
One of the things, and that is such a good point. A lot of clerks or election officials will do what they call a logic and accuracy test, LNA test. What they do is they say, y'all come in and look how great these machines work. And so people come in and they take a bunch of 200 ballots and they run them through a machine, and it gives them, and then they hand count it and they prove that the tallies match, and they say, see, these machines work perfect. Any computer programmer knows that that is so stupid, because I can make that machine behave differently a microsecond later, because I can write the code that says, guess what? today we're going to make it work this way, and tomorrow we're going to make it work that way. And I think Greasy Boots reminded me earlier, I think it was him, about remember the big scandal with Volkswagen. They made it so that whenever you drove the Volkswagen into the smog test, that the machine, the computer in the car behaved differently than when you weren't getting a smog test, so that it would pass the standards when the rest of the time it wouldn't. So, I mean, anybody who understands programming knows that is a completely bogus demonstration.
You know what's funny about you bringing that up is you're in the town where 2 factories that would close down were housing all of those Volkswagens.
No kidding.
We had 2, one out in Kensington and one right here in town, that thousands and thousands and thousands of those cars.
No
man.
kidding.
Right
so I'm right in the belly of that beast too.
Yes, you are. That's amazing. Okay, let's see. Lisa says, Raffensperger is walking away and folks scream questions because he refuses to speak. We've seen that firsthand.
Yes. Raffensperger and Chris Carr, too, our Attorney General, is like...
They're non-existent.
Non-existent, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Georgia Patriot says, Dr. Frank, you helped me and my friends get credentials and rooms for the Cyber Symposium. Phenomenal experience. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad. That was an amazing event for me, too. It was a 3-day event, and that's when Mr. Lindell was basically showing the world that he had the electronic information, and I was MC for that.
Yeah, I met him today, actually, and he was telling me that story. So great to see you out here. Andy.
Good to be here.
Hey to you, Andy. No, I'm not the new media. I appreciate it, though. But Jennifer Jones-Hilligus, one of my favorites. Let poll workers vote at the precinct they work at, so we can eliminate early voting for them.
Yeah,
too.
Sure, of course. There's no as long as everybody's being supervised. There's no reason.
Yes, and she also says paper ballots hand counted on election day.
Absolutely.
Brian Queen, my brother, he says, are we getting any traction nationally on getting any of this changed?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. But it requires, I call them beachheads. You need to have a beachhead in every state, and that's, when I first was doing this in 2021, I was kind of doing the shotgun approach, talking anywhere I could get an invitation. This last year, I've been really focusing in on the key areas, which is why I'm back here. I think this is a beachhead here in this part of your state. And let me give you an example. This is a recent example, just as of today. In Northern California, Shasta County is a beachhead there.
That's right.
We were able to get them to go all paper a year ago. As soon as they went all paper, and what I mean by all paper, they have paper poll books, paper ballots, hand-marked paper ballots, hand-counted at the end of the day, hand-report the tallies, okay? People are watching the whole process. People are running the whole... They saved a factor of 10 on their election costs. That was where we're going. Well, as soon as that passed, the state has been attacking them, and outside money's coming in, and they just tried to do a recall election on... They have 5 commissioners, and we had a 3-2 majority, and they're trying to recall the one commissioner that enabled us to do this. His name's Kevin Cry. Well, the recall election just happened Tuesday, and he survived by about 97 votes.
Wow.
In the recall. It was a big deal. Wow. We got a big turnout, and we have a movement going there. But guess what? The local officials the election officials were very unhappy with it because they don't like it that the commissioners are trying to get rid of these electronic machines. And so they ordered a recount. The clerks did. And how hard do the local people work to get recounts and go to court and everything? Whereas they just get to order a recount immediately, which they did. They spent $400,000 on their recount. Okay, they spent that of the tax money for Shasta County, and the recount came out a little different than the 97. He only won by 47, but he survived. So. But it tells you there's like a double standard there too. The people who are in control of elections want to keep it that way.
Absolutely.
So when you say what kind of traction are we getting nationally, California is an example where I have more success there than almost anywhere else in the country because one county was willing to step out. Now other counties are joining them. Right. I've got the same situation in Montana. I've got the same situation in Nebraska, Wisconsin. We're beginning to make a lot of progress.
Good.
I think at the beginning, people made the same mistake I made. People were assuming if we brought attention to the fact that the elections were hackable, if we brought evidence and brought it to our legislators and brought it to our DAs and brought it to our sheriffs, that they would intervene. We all thought that. We've discovered They're not going to do that. So we kind of had to re-strategize and form a new strategy, which we're now doing, which is working.
Right.
Which is we don't wait for the laws to do it. We don't wait for the legislators to do it. We take back control locally, county by county,
Right.
one at a time. And in that respect, I can tell you, all across the country, this place is on fire. We are waking up everywhere.
Good.
Every day of my life, I'm meeting with another grassroots team like this.
Man.
It's very exciting.
Well, I mean, the work you're doing is completely invaluable. I mean, I
Thank
wish
you.
know
They
that.
call me the Johnny Appleseed of election
That's
integrity.
Right. That's right.
I'm pleased.
All right, Sharon, thank you for watching. Georgia Patriot, yes, we are brothers. I know what book you're talking about. Listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Greasy Boots have a last word. I'm going to give you
Sure.
a last word, and then
Sure.
we're gonna go. So, what do you want to say there, Greasy?
Oh, well, I just thank Dr. Frank for coming and giving Floyd County and us here the his attention for the day.
Honor.
It's
Honor to be
awesome.
with you.
And we're going to try to take everything that we have learned and
Yes.
try to use that going forward and just continue the fight. And I don't know what the future holds, but we're going to keep being persistent at it.
And we're going to do it together, man.
That's right.
We're
Yeah,
gonna do it together.
Eventually, with enough pressure and persistence and all, the grassroots movement is just continually growing. I've
Yes.
seen it over the last 3-4 years now. What started off as just a small handful of a few people has grown, and it just continues to grow. So
Absolutely.
I think I think our best days are ahead of us. We
Yes.
just got to keep fighting on for right now.
I do, man. Dr. Frank, what do you want to tell everybody?
I think I'll use a biblical metaphor
Sure.
because it illustrates the problem we're in and the solution at once. People ask me, "What's going to happen in 2024, Dr. Frank?" And I think it really boils down to the same question as David shows up at the battlefield and Goliath is out in the field, and David goes to his brothers and he says, "Hey, brothers, why aren't you taking care of business out here? There's this huge man out here insulting our God and insulting our nation. Why aren't you addressing it?" And what did his three brothers tell David? They said, "Go back to the sheep," right? They didn't have faith. They didn't trust that God would win. And so David stood in front of Goliath and he told Goliath, "It's not me fighting you today. This is the Lord's battle. And today he's going to deliver you into my hand." So then he slew Goliath. And once he slew Goliath, then the children of Israel rose up and chased the Philistines out of the land. So what we need are Davids. David, greasy boots. We need Davids to stand in front of Goliath and fight. And then once God wins the victory, and we know he will because this is a battle between good and evil,
That's right.
and we're on the good side. How do we know that? We don't want to castrate children. We know the difference between an innie and an outie. We don't want to murder our children. We know these things, so we know we're on the right side. God's going to win this battle for us. So what's going to happen in 2024? We need a miracle, but so did David. So
Right.
it feels like that to me. That's the situation we're in. All God needs is for us to stand, and it's all in God's timing. And I like the way Mike Lindell puts it. He says, 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this and we're going to say, gee, when we were in the middle of this was so devastating and this was horrible. But we're going to look back at that and we're going to say, all those things had to happen, or we would never have waken up as a nation. We wouldn't have realized that we've lost our country. We wouldn't realize how depraved we were.
Yes.
And we needed to go through this process
Yes.
to wake up and to turn our eyes to heaven and to get back on track. So I think that's the right way to look
Gave me
at this.
cold chills, man. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
We have to go through these pains in order to come out on the other side.
Well, in the back of my Bible, there's this 450-year graph showing the children of Israel going into depravity and repenting and idolatry and repenting and over and over and over again. And it ends at the Babylonian captivity. And God allowed the Israelis the Hebrew nation to be captured. Remember Nebuchadnezzar,
Yes.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and all those stories, and Daniel and the lion's den and all that. They had to spend 70 years in captivity. God allowed another nation to judge them. I don't know whether we are going to now have 70 years of judgment, which we've earned fair and square.
Sure.
Or whether we're going to repent as a nation and be restored and restore that covenant that we originally made with God and this nation. I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever the outcome, we nevertheless have to be the Daniels.
That's right.
We have to be the Shadrach and Abednegos. We have to stand for the truth, and we have to make that stand regardless of which way it goes. So that's the fight we're in right now.
That's good stuff, man. Good stuff. we're fixing to end the show. Tell us where you're going to be at tomorrow. You're going to be here in Floyd, right?
Yeah, at Floyd, at Rome, at the and that's being hosted by Regenbach. She's one of the candidates. I don't remember what time it's at. And
I don't
It's
either.
at 6 o'clock at the Thornton Center.
Yes.
I forget the exact address, but I know it's the Thornton Center, Rome, yeah, and we'll share it on our social media sites and all that. Yeah.
We're going to blast it out there. I'll tell you firsthand, I have been to one of these. You need to make plans to go. Bring your families. It is worth every single minute of time. You
I
can
keep it fun. I keep it fun.
Oh yeah, he does.
It's a lot of material to take in, so
it's
I
going to
keep it
blow
fun.
your mind.
Yeah.
This is not just a stand. This is your county, your people, your state. It's amazing. Douglas G. Frank on Facebook. He's also on Telegram as
Follow the Data with Dr. Frank.
Follow the Data. We're going to post all of these links up so that you guys can get more hooked up with Dr. Frank. It's been amazing with you, sir. I thank
pleasure.
you so much for being here with us. Greasy Boots, I love you. I appreciate everything y'all are doing.
The real deal right here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thanks, guys. We'll be back with Monday night candidate forums. We're going to have Nick Ware from Chattooga County running for commissioner. So